Hello everyone, I'm Psychotic, and that's also my screen name. Now I know I've been away for a little while. I recently had a cervical fusion surgery, and the recovery was a little bit, well, rough. Especially when you compound my previous lower back surgeries complicating the physical therapy options available. It was really bad. But anyway, I have a metal plate in my neck now, fusing my C4 to C7 vertebrae. I'm still struggling a little bit with sitting or standing for long periods, so the video will probably need to be recorded in multiple sessions. I will try to clean it up in editing, but if it skips around or repeats, please try to be understanding. This time, we're actually getting around to stations. I've threatened it long enough. We're going to be going over production stations, shipyards, trade stations, and system claiming. The setups I've tried, which ones I've liked, which ones I didn't, and why. And we'll also try to go in depth on station managers, placements of stations, and ownership of systems. We're going to be using two fantastic resources, one of which is the universe map that we've used prior, and the other one is going to be a station planner. I'm going to be showing how to use both of them, and we'll make sure that we link both of them in the description as well. If you learn anything useful today, or if you have a good time, please don't be afraid to drop a like. If you're feeling friendly, maybe go ahead and subscribe. But either way, let's go ahead and get into it. Alrighty, here we are loaded into my split start save. I figured it made sense to use this one since it's where most of my experimentation took place. So the first thing that you're going to want to know how to do is how to actually access parts to build a station. Because from the get-go, you have very, very little available. So the easiest way is to find somebody that is a different faction. For instance, this guy here is a Paranid. So if we right-click him and go to Comms, we can ask, where can I find? And we want to find the faction representative. Now, that will lead you to his faction's representative, not the faction that you are in. So that's important to know. So if you were, for instance, to hail an say you were in FRF space and you hail a Paranid, it's not going to take you to the FRF representative. It's going to take you to the Paranid representative. The other way, once you already found them, is they have different symbols so that you can tell. So we've got a person here. So there's a person here. And you would go to the representative in those stations. There's only going to be one each. And you can buy recipes. I would absolutely love to show that, but unfortunately I have all of the recipes for all of the currently available people here. The downside to purchasing your blueprints is going to be they are incredibly expensive. To completely clear out somebody to purchase everything from a single faction is going to be right around $1 billion, give or take 200 million credits. So obviously you're going to want to very much pick and choose what parts you're ordering when you first start out. There are several different types of stations that you can build, and you can mix and match. You can have multiple application stations. For instance, this here is my defense claim, and I've named all of my stations appropriately, so it's what gives me my green border and lets me police this station, or the station, this system. Now, all that you really need to do that is this guy right here, the administrative center. It doesn't have to be your races. It can be any race, but you do need an administrative center. You can't actually buy one of those until you are rank 20 plus for reputation. And if you're struggling with reputation, we do have a video in the playlist specifically to help you gain rep. Once you can dock with a place, you can buy most of your civilian stuff. And then once you get up to positive 10, so basically, -9, you can dock and get some general items. 10 plus, you're going to get what's called a military license, and that's going to allow you to buy most of the middling, and some of the large weapons, shields, etc. But once you hit 20, you can get the advanced license, which is going to let you get your defense modules, your ancillary ships, your capital ships, etc. So if you want to get all of the recipes from somebody, you need to be a minimum of 20 to actually pull that off. Now, like I said, this was my split start, so I use split for most things. When you go to build your station, like obviously, if this is what's keeping control of the system for me, I want some defense on it. So I basically just built a very bare framework. There's not much to this, but just this is enough to protect against an entire fleet. If they have more than 1 or 2 capital ships, you might have a problem. But otherwise, just this basic layout is plenty enough to protect this system. So the yellow denotes your starting point for the system. So if I disconnect this, it shows everything that's dependent on it. The order over here that things are in is the order that they're built in, and it's in the order that you put them down. So you can actually use that, and I can't really muck about with this because it's already completed. The uncompleted ones would just look like this. But if you want to change the order once you've put something down, you can do things like if I were to pull this off, this one right here specifically, and reattach it, it would actually move all of this down in the order to the bottom. So you can use that when you're building your production stations to your advantage to make sure that your storages go in last so that they don't fill up awkwardly, but we'll get more into that later. Basically, this is just your average setup for something very, very simple. And then you can get into here and you can edit their loadouts. So as you can see, I have guns in every placement, and you can see what you have in every placement. So I've got the plasmas for the larges, and then I've got the flak for the small, just like I do with my ships, if you recall from the combat tutorial video. So anything, then they are set appropriately. So we've got the larges are targeting capital ships, and the smalls are targeting, well, the mediums, I suppose, are targeting smaller ships. But there are so many damn guns on this thing that it is quite solid. The other nice thing is as long as you have logical overview, as long as you have drones, then it will repair itself if it's damaged, as long as the core isn't taken out, as long as the whole thing's not wrecked. Don't really need a lot of docking. I just threw a basic docking on here because the only person that usually docks at these is me. But this guy here is the important part to claim the system. Now, when you claim systems, there's a lot of argument about how the system claiming goes, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with updates. I'm sure at one point both sides of the argument were correct. I never bothered to figure out which side was correct. I just did it my own way because I'm like that. But when somebody owns a system, one of their stations here is going to have, well, possibly more than one, is going to have that same admin building. Well, and here's where the argument comes in. So with the administrative systems, whoever has one in there first gets control of the system. If I were to build one here, and I have one here, so I don't have control of this system because theirs was here first. If and this is the other awkward part is the Paranids have moved in, so I'm pretty sure somewhere in here there's a Paranid one as well, which I wanted to get mine up before the Paranids did, and I did, just in case something happened to the split so that it wouldn't go to Paranid control, because this is a split home system. The argument is whoever's is there first gets priority. So if we destroyed the split, then it would revert to me as opposed to the Paranids because I was in here first. The other side of the argument is that because there's a Paranid and mine here, that it would become a contested system and nobody would get control of it until you outed the other person or built more. I don't know if either of those arguments are true. All that I know is if I want to take over a system and there's somebody else there, I'm going to destroy every single one of them that's in the system. That way I don't have to worry about it because mine will be the only one in there in an unclaimed system. Once this goes gray, you know that nobody has control. That's the time to build. And some of it's opportunistic. Like most of this, I did not fight the split. Well, that's not entirely true. I took the side of the split conflict where I freed the slaves, and all of this went red, and I did not want split slaves at all, so I completely smashed the teeth into the slavers to the point where they keep trying to rebuild this, and I just keep knocking it down. I have an entire fleet here that just goes around looking for when this crops back up. NPCs have a truly unlimited amount of credit, so as long as they have an ally alive, they can get money to start building again. So basically, if you want to fight somebody out, you're going to have to constantly keep knocking them back down because as long as they have an ally, they're just going to keep coming back. But as long as I don't let them build up any power, they're not really a threat. So that's how your system claiming goes, and I've got one of these in every system. A lot of these systems that I own only have that. Like, that's the only thing in it. and that's just because I wanted the land. The upside to owning a system is when you put down a plot to build a station, it's free. If you tried to build one in somebody's system that you don't own, for instance, the two that I built over here, I had to pay for both of these plots. I had to pay taxes to the borons for them, which is why I destroyed all of the boron stations in this system, because it has really, really good mining here. So I knocked the borons out, claimed it for myself because I built, as you can see, a shit ton of stations here. This was one of my experiments that kind of worked, didn't really work. We'll get to the production here in just a moment. But for system claiming, that's the thing. You just need it to go gray, and then slap one of your own admin stations in it. Now, admin stations are, like I said, you have to be ranked 20 with somebody to get a recipe, and you do not start out with your own. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The other way to get your recipes, other than purchasing them, and it is in fact free, is to get some EMP grenades and find a station, find a part that you don't own from a people that you don't own, and throw EMP grenades at them until you get a data leak, and then scan the data leak. And at that point, there's a small chance that you will get the recipe for whatever piece that the data leak was on. Unfortunately, I am very impatient, and I already had a fairly decent mining empire going by the time that I would have even attempted that, so I just didn't bother with it. I just bought everybody out. So shipyards are going to be another very big thing that you're going to want to build. Essentially, once you have fully functioning and fully supplied shipyards, money's not really, it doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. Once you can get all of the raw materials yourself and build the ship yourself, there's absolutely no point to spend money on anybody ever for any reason. So at this point, it's basically just number go up. But my first station, I thought I would be smart and make a super station. And that is exactly what I did. This is an absolute monstrosity. But it works. The problem is everything is okay, it says. The biggest problem with doing a station like this, and I realize that I can fix it now based on things that I know, but when you have more than one material coming in from miners, both solids and liquids, the station will send out a ship to mine a specific element that it needs. Not a big deal. That's what you want. You want it to bring the elements back. When it brings the element back, if the station cannot take its full inventory, it will retain some of it. So the next time it sends it out for a different solid, you're gonna come back again with whatever space remaining that you had, full of a different element, and drop it off. And then anything that's still left. So basically, the more times it gets sent out, the less and less inventory it has available to mine for your station. The AI is kind of derpy that way. They won't just mine what they want. They won't just mine it to full. They will fill their hole. I mean, there are ways to work around that I figured out later. So I could realistically get this one functioning again if I wanted to. But right now I just have it buying all of the parts that it needs to build ships. And as long as you set your cost of ships in your logistic overview, you set your construction prices to other factions to maximum, they will buy. They won't buy as quickly as they would if it was at 100%. But as long as you have that at 150, you're gonna make profit. It's not gonna be hand over fist, but you're gonna make profit. The better way is, rather than buying everything, would be to make your own. And that's where I got into production here. My second attempt, rather than making a super station, I made a station for every single individual part that I would possibly need, including parts of parts. And then I have a trader, a flotilla of traders for each of these that trade the parts in here as needed, and then up to this shipyard as needed, and to the distribution center. You can see that I got some pilot problems here, or pirate problems here and here. But there's also a distribution center that they are selling to. I don't remember where I put the boron one. Ah, there it is. So the boron distribution center is here. Now, when you have your staff in here, how many stars your staff person has? So as you can see, my guy here has a 5 in management. Each one of these stars, any traders assigned to the station can go 2 jumps. So at 5 stars, they can go 10 jumps out. So I have a distribution network set up across the entire galaxy that are 10 jumps to each one. See, like there's one here. Even though there's not really much going on here, it's 10 jumps away, and then that'll help connect to the ones over here, and it'll help connect to the ones down here, and I think there's one over here somewhere in Trinity. But there's one every 10 jumps. So the second experiment worked really well. This is absolutely smooth. These guys are actually producing enough of every material that I can supply 2 shipyards. I can supply that one and then my defensive one here at the entry to boron space just fine, no issues, and have extra to sell. The downside is there were so damn many traders required to get this to work right that I bogged my own system for a while until I got my upgraded computer. So that was a bit of a problem. And there are still, I have an absolutely asinine amount of traders flying around. I have just a flotilla. And somewhere in here, oh, we're still in. So you can see I've got 10 haulers just for drone components, 10 haulers for substrate, 7 haulers for Claytronics, 15 for Chelt. And it's required just to keep those systems going right. The best way that I found was the way that I've been doing it over here. And that was to set up depots. So there's an ore depot, there's a silicone depot, hydrogen, helium, that's the defense platform, methane, and ice. So I have a depot for everything, and then I assigned the miners here. And then for the actual places that are just making the components, and I'm not making subcomponents anymore, I'm just making finished stuff that we need. These guys have miners that are set up as traders, because traders cannot haul ore. But that way I don't have to worry about them only filling up a partial inventory because they're only going to quote unquote buy what they need. So that way I haven't had problems with my miners out of here getting stuck. So see, he's mineral for the advanced electronics factory, and he's completely empty. So I'm not having that same issue. And if these ones get overfilled, since each depot is only dealing in one material, that's not a problem. If they're overfilled, they're not going to get a partial fill of something else. They'll just fill back up when they get sent out. This way is working much, much better with far fewer. I have 2 traders per station and 1 miner that's just zipping back and forth because they're in the same system, so it's not super bad. And then everything from there will go to the trade centers. This also helps to keep your builds down. As you can see, this is not nearly as monstrous. That's not actually part of this build. That is the neighboring stations. So each station is kind of blocky. But you can see the allowed space is much smaller. The build is much cleaner. So if you do have to build somewhere that you have not claimed, it's not nearly as big of a deal. And I have a very specific way that I like to start these guys out. I do the split pier because it's got 4 instead of 3. Now, the boron actually has 5, but it's very awkward to deal with shape-wise. And then I've got an 8 medium, because I have a lot of medium ships coming in and out as well. And then I've got a basic small back here with 6 small and 3 more medium. So that gives me all the docking I could ever want. And then straight off of there, I can use connectors. And I know I'm split, and I use split for pretty much everything except for the Terran things that I need. But the splits connector has a 3-way connector, and it is very, very awkward to build from inside a square. So I actually cheat and use the argon cross connectors because it's basically like a D6. So you have 6 things that you can connect to. But you'll notice that all of my stations have the same setup. And it just works really nice because you can get your storage off to the sides. You can branch down from it and get your stuff in line down here. It works really, really, really nice. And obviously, if you're not sure what you need to get a place to go, that's where our first resource is going to come in handy. Let me just pull it up real quick. So this guy here will help you figure out what you want to make. So if you look through here, you'll never have to make Terran energy cells unless you want to, which I recommend not, because regular energy cell production is much cheaper to build and maintain. But it's an option. But let's say we wanted some Claytronics. So we'll go Claytronics. And I have a tendency to just flop in 5 every time. Now, this is the stuff that it's going to need to function, and rather than trying to figure out how many of each of this it's going to produce, they have this handy autofill modules, so it fills everything out. So now we're just looking at base materials. Now we also want to make sure that we have a workforce to supply it. So at this point, we're going to look into our habitats. No. What's the split one called? Parlors. So each large is worth 1,000. So we're going to need 13 of these guys. And that's actually going to change it again because now they're going to need chelt meat, scruff and fruit, and medical supplies. So we'll autofill again. Now it's gone up to 15. So we can go back to our parlor and add 2 more. And autofill. So we're at 15 out of 15,105. So we can add another parlor. And we'll go with the small one this time. And autofill. And now we've got 15,250 out of 15,105. We're not worried about these resources because we're bringing them in ourselves. So it's essentially going to be free. So this expenses versus production with profit is actually not right because we are going to have miners provide basic materials. Checking it. Miners provide basic resources. So now this thing will realistically give us 11.7 million an hour as long as we keep it supplied with materials once it's fully built. And that's with sunlight 100%, which is where Rogi's map comes in handy. One, it helps you find a place that has all the ores you need. And I will say the high-low, mid plus high is not always super accurate. I think that's a little bit RNG, but your sunlight and what's in the system are always correct. As I've had some places where it says something's really, really high, and I have had a hell of a time finding it there where they actually go to the next system over to get it. So you can use this to figure out where to put your whole setup. And like you can see with this particular one at Rolk's Demise is where one of my setups is, my second one. And the reason that I have the 2 energy cells being made in Menelaus instead is if you look at the sunlight here, it's only 15%. If you look at the sunlight in Menelaus, it's 271%. So I can get away with way fewer solar panels to get it done. And then like where we're looking at now, we're in Tharka's Ravine. So if we go to Tharka's Ravine, we're looking at, so we only have ore, silicon, and ice in system. But if you mouse over the next one over, it's got hydrogen, helium, and methane. So we've got everything nearby within a jump. And like I said, the station master's stars are the only ones that matter to sub-assign ships. So for traders, if your trader has a single star, but your station master has 5, your trader will take stuff 10 jumps. He can and will. Same thing with your miners. Your miners will go up to 10 jumps if necessary. You obviously don't want that, but it's a thing. But the sunlight here is 117%, so I actually used that when I was building. So if we change this to 117%, it's going to modify how many energy cells we actually need. So at this point, let's back our energy cell production off and see if that changed it. Not really, but that's all right. The other nice thing about having traders is anything in excess that's being created, energy cells, water, etc., can go to your actual distribution centers like I had set up. And distribution centers are super simple, but this is nice. The station costs are a little iffy. For instance, Claytronics used to take Claytronics to make, and that is no longer the case. They did a little bit of rebalancing for that so that you don't get stuck in a death spiral trying to build something. So don't necessarily watch what's going on over here. Your first station, you're going to have to buy most of what you're setting up for most of your stations. I highly recommend building Claytronics, building energy, and hull parts first, because you're going to need those for every station. So if you do those ones first, you can have those supply your later stations and carry on that way. Now, if you're in a dangerous sector, you're also going to want to worry about arming the place. So in each of these, I also have guns assigned. So if we edit loadout, I have guns assigned on every part of this entire thing. And so that each one of these, if a hostile does get into the system, each one of these is capable of taking down a small fleet, or even a medium fleet for that matter. So it's always good to do that, but you're also going to need the parts to make the guns. So that's why we try to set up one with everything. And then I set up my shipyards separately, and this is very, very simple. They have some habitat modules, which are not optional. They are optional on everything else. You don't have to have workers to produce goods. The workers make the goods produce faster. So if you don't have enough money to get that rolling right away, that is something you can leave off. With the shipyards, they are not optional because that's where your crew comes from. So you have to have your habitation modules for that. Now, I had seen where people had said that the people that you hire for your crew are random. That is not true. I've seen that in more than one place, and that is absolutely not true. The people that you hire for your crew are based on what nation's habitat modules you have on your station. So, for instance, in Boron space, you will always get Boron crew if you buy crew from a Boron station. Whereas here, because I used only split stuff, every one of my ships comes out with only split on board. And you can mix and match if you want. You can put, one split, because they're all the same. So the large is 1,000. So if I did one split, one ARG, one Terran, one Talati, I would wind up with a random mix of people. But because they're all split, it will always be all split on my ship. And then what I did for build, I have 2 for large and 2 repair for large. And then I have 2 for small, 2 repair for small, and then 2 for extra large, 2 repair for extra large. And then the rest of it is just storage for, docking and storage so that they can keep the materials that they need in place. And I slapped probably way more storage than I needed on there. But I can also build 2 large ships at a time and 2 extra large ships at a time, which really, per station, which really, really, really helps. And all I did was just put it down in a chain, splitting it off as needed. But I also own the station, or the system that all these stations are in. You can see my cube is way bigger than I needed. This would cost $1 million to put this cube in somebody else's space, but because I own the space, it was completely free, so I figured, screw it, go big or go home, right? Now for the trading depots, these guys are very, very simple. The biggest part that you're going to want to keep in mind is some kind of armaments, because they are prime targets for pirates. So I've got just some basic armament here at the top. It's more than enough, especially since all of the storages also have armaments, and then there's one at the bottom. And then I just slapped, 20 large storage containers on here. I think I was going for one of every material, and then I just liked the way that this looked, so I slapped it together like that. You can also come up here and save your station, and then you can use it to basically plop it in someplace else. So if we come down here and look at the depot that I've got down in Terran space, if I can remember where the hell it was, you're going to see an absolutely identical build. Because why do the work twice, right? And that's the build that I would use for every one of my depots. And then each one of these guys has several traders as well assigned to them. I mean, he's got, what is that, 2.2 billion storage? I'm pretty sure he's good. But this one's getting filled slowly, whereas the one up in Boron space was filled quickly because of how close it is to this mess over here. So they start bringing it down right away. And trading in between, so them trading to the shipyard also gives experience to the station master. They will hit 5 stars very quickly. And if in doubt, you can always take one of your experienced ones from over here. Like if I build a new depot, I might take one of the station masters from one of these and throw him in it just so that the depot can get started right away. But also incoming trades and outgoing trades are going to give them XP. So these guys, this depot filling the next depot that's 10 jumps away, is still going to give this depot XP as well. And then so they have traders that are giving to each other to distribute my network. And then they are actually selling as well to people in the area. And people in the area are buying and coming to get it themselves. So all in all, it's a pretty good distribution center. It works really well for money. And my net worth is 328 billion at this point. So if we go to account management, so if I accept all estimates, there are a couple that are negative. The shipyards, for some reason, show negative, even though they're not actually spending any money because they only buy from self. All of these numbers are very, very much eclipsed by my distribution centers. Like this one's 4.5 million. This one's 3.7 million. This one's 15 million. All of these are my distro centers. This one's 5 million. And this is for like, what, 30 seconds of gameplay because it's been paused this whole time. The best part about the third attempt and doing it with the depots instead is I don't have the confusion with the NPCs and everything's running smoother, but it's also running smoother with way fewer ships. And I could essentially get this original shipyard that I built, this monstrosity over here, to function again if I just built depots here. But I really don't want to pay the Terrans to do it. And it's making money. I'm not using it anyway because it's got, it's got Argon habitation modules. So most of my ships are running split people. I don't really want to have Argons. Another neat trick that you can do with a shipyard like this, if you're buying all the parts coming in and just selling at 150 for small profit, if you put it somewhere that is between two hostile factions, like the Boron and the Split don't get along. So if I were to put one, say, here, both sides would be buying from it, and then they would be fighting it out basically in the orbit around the station. So it would be a constant stream of income as they're replacing ships that are immediately getting destroyed. Now, as far as adding stations goes, let's see, we've got Silicone, we've got Computronic, we've got Turret. Go to Manage Plots, and we would set up a new plot. I have 114 stations currently. So if we make a new plot, you can make it whatever size you'd like. And in this particular case, I've been trying to keep these more or less the same size, so just straight 5s. So if we set all of these to straight 5s, so if we set it to straight 5s, we can create a new plot, and it'll let us put it where we want. So the small square in the middle is the actual build area. The square on the outside is to make sure that you don't overlap stations. So I like to do something like that. And then we would figure out what we want to build. In this particular case, we're going to plan build. And we're going to start out the way that I have been with all of the others. So we're going to, these little guys out here that look weird, they're actually the build storage. So you can more or less ignore that. So let's go for docking modules. We've got split in the filter. So we can take our first one. We're just going to slap it in. It's very hard to get it where you want on the first try, so you just slap it in. And then you can use these guys to kind of move it the way you want. Now, since everything else that we have depot-wise is over there, I really, really don't want my main docking point for large ships to be facing away from that, because then the ships are going to have to go all the way around it, and that is a giant pain in the butt. And it slows down production. So there's our first one in place. And then we can go for the medium. So that's going to give us some spacing. Now, make sure that these are right side up, because I have had several instances where when it auto-attaches, it puts it upside down. And it is a giant pain in the ass to park in, and you can see the squares for the incoming. So we know that it's right side up. And then we're just going to do a basic because it is a trade center. We're going to turn it this way until it latches. So there we are in that way. And you can actually pull one of these as well. So let's do a base 1. And it won't latch because it's turned the wrong way, so we'll turn it that way. And then if we can get a hold of the actual piece. Sometimes you got to zoom way in for this. Yeah, it's going to be a pain in the butt. There it goes. So now it's latched. And then we can use the Argon 4-way piece that I like to build down. So then we can take our vertical 2, which gives us a long amount, and then we can start building off of there. And from there, basically, you just attach your pieces. As far as storage goes, you're obviously going to usually want large storage containers. You're going to want container storage for your finished product. You're going to want solid storage for solids and liquid storage for liquids, depending on what you're making. And see, sometimes it doesn't like to attach, so if you just put it down, then you can adjust it this way. And then when you get close, it'll snap on. So there's our solid. Then we can put a liquid over here. And you can copy parts if you want. That is useful more often than it's not. But in this particular case, we don't need to. Now, remember I said the order is important. And if you start building production modules down here, at this point, as soon as the first production module is done, it will assign all of the available necessary storage to just that module. So you can, depending on how fast your build goes, wind up with the issue of your entire storage is filled with ice, say, and you don't have any room for the mineral that you need to actually make your end product. So the best thing to do, like I was talking about with the orders up here. Okay, so I've added a couple of parlors here, so you can see in the order how they're in a different order. Now at this point, if we were to take this guy and disconnect him and then reconnect him, he's now at the bottom. So that's how we would get around the issue of if you start building and say we had the food supply part up, but not the actual substrate or whatever we're making, you might wind up with your storages completely filled with ice or completely filled with something else while you're building the other parts. So by putting your storages at the very end, you make sure that that doesn't happen because they don't have anywhere to store stuff. They will be the last things built. So generally speaking, you would do your whole build and then pull these off and reattach them just so that you don't wind up with storages that aren't assigned properly, because it's going to assume that it's functioning with just one or two production modules and assign all storage to those production modules. Then as more get built, it will readjust. But if it's too slow being built, that the readjustment doesn't have room for the new material, if you have too much of one material, it's just going to sit there until it's used. I actually ran into that issue in my first iteration where I had way too much ice and barely any room for anything else. And make sure as you're going through that you go through and do your loadouts. So like you can select a saved loadout, or you can just reassign new weapons to all of your slots. So, you know, your mediums, you want the flak. And then on your larges, if you had any, which this does not, you would do your plasma. You want to make sure that you have assigned trade wares, what they will buy and what they won't buy. And you want to make sure that, like, if you look at all of these trade restrictions to everywhere, so I make sure that my energy cells are only coming from myself. They are on myself only, so the only allowed faction is psychotropic. And the way to do that is to go into global orders and set it up here. So like I have no hostile travel, I've got self only for trade, and I show how to set these up in the beginner's start guide, but you can kind of get a gist of it here as well. But ultimately, that's the way to do it. That's what you need to know about stations. You can, in fact, put, say, the station that has one of the depots in it. If you wanted to have your depot in a self-owned station or self-owned system and maintain the self-owned system, you don't necessarily have to build two different ones like this. I could very easily have put that admin center in my shipyard, and it would not have been a problem. I don't know where I would have stuck it, but I could have done it. But ultimately, that's the gist of stations. You can get very creative. I'm sure you guys can come up with much better looking stations than I did. I tend to make bricks because I'm all about the efficiency as opposed to the pretty. But I'm absolutely positive that you guys can have quite a bit of fun with this. The other thing to remember is to assign builders to something. When you assign a builder, like I have mine right here, if you use your own, then obviously you don't have to pay the builder. Also, they very, very quickly give your people 5 stars in service. I swap these out probably every 2 stations, and they're from 1 star to 5 stars. It is that easy. But if you can't, you can always hire a nearby one. You might have to click the hire button a couple of times. Sometimes it'll pick up and you'll go to hire somebody and they'll all disappear. So if you just close out of the menu and do it again, you'll get a different list that'll probably let you hire people. I had that problem quite a bit when I was doing it. Remember your resources. Use Rogi's maps to help you figure out where you want to put your stuff yourself. This system is a really good one, except you're going to have to pay the boron unless you take it over like I did. I took it over at 30 rep, which is max, and it dropped me down to about 16, and I've already built back up to 30 from there, so it wasn't a huge deal to take out just one system. I actually paid the 1 million for the plot in the Terran over here, which is unfortunate, but I didn't know any better. And then I was in the middle of trying to take over this system here. I put down my first part, and I was building Maja Dust and going to work through here, and they took this one out from under me before I could do anything about it. So I'm going to have to take the HAT out, which is really unfortunate because I like the HAT. They gave me my first trade ship and let me build the empire that I have. But, you know, business is business. Use that planner to help you figure out how many of what you want to build. I generally just do 5 of the main component So each one of these that's here has, like, this one has 5 advanced electronics, this one has 5 hull parts, this one has 5 claytronics, etc. And then just use that planner to fill it out. Remember to change your populace more than once, because when you add populace, you also have to add the infrastructure required to keep them fed. So it'll calculate that for you as well. So you add as many as you need, click it again, and then you're going to need more people again to supply the new stuff. A large or an extra large ship takes 1 hour to build. So with the 6x speed going, it actually only takes 10 minutes. That's your stations. That's how it works. That's how you keep it fun. Have fun adventuring and building your own empires. I'm sure you guys will do fantastic. Probably better than I did. But I hope I did some of the groundwork for you so that you don't have to trial and error stuff the way that I did. This is definitely the way to go. A couple of depots for each type, and then just trading in system with each other. If you guys learned anything useful or if you had a good time, please don't be afraid to drop a like. If you're feeling friendly, maybe go ahead and subscribe. But either way, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time.